Hello, welcome to Demystifying Death, a podcast. My name is Marcus Gonzalez, and today we'll be talking to 5 individuals about the culture of death and dying and its impacts on us as individuals and as a society. Keep your mind open and you might be surprised at what you learn, and you might also find that death is not so scary after all. Let's get started. Hello and welcome to our first ever podcast. Today we will be hearing from 5 different individuals and their take on death. We will hear about the experiences they have had with death and their take on the end-of-life process. Each person will think about death a little differently based on a variety of factors. Today we are going to look at how each person's idea of death is influenced by their culture. Since everyone in today's podcast has a part of American culture that they identify with, I will be using the American death culture as a baseline to highlight the differences everyone has. When I say American death culture, I will be referring to what we usually see depicted in the media. We will use the framework that Tony Walter explains in his article, Historical and Cultural Variants on the Good Death. From Tony's research, we can see the shift from a religious control on death to a medical control on death. This is mirrored by John Cagle's studies on how hospice has impacted the way we look at death. There is also a clear distinction on obtaining good medical care between white Americans and the POC community and the trust each community has with that care. So let's get started. Hello and welcome to the show. Can you first start off by telling us your name and the culture that you identify with?
My name is Margarita Gonzalez, and the cultures that I belong to, identify with, is the Catholic religion. Hispanic, from Puerto Rico, but I'm originally from New York, and I go with the culture from New York.
Okay.
New York Rican.
New York Rican. Okay.
My name is Sherry Craig, and I'm American culture.
Right, so I'm Naomi Nelson, and I am Haitian American.
My name is Summer Yakub. I am Middle Eastern, Palestinian specifically.
My name is Autumn, and I've always grown up surrounded in American culture.
So has anyone thought about what their good death would look like or about their funeral?
Yes.
All right. How would you describe your good death?
Everybody hopes to die in their sleep, so they're not feeling pain. I don't want any pain. And I don't necessarily want a funeral per se. I just want maybe my immediate family to get together, after I'm cremated. I don't want a viewing or anything like that.
So a cremation, no funeral, just a quick little get together.
Yeah, quick little get together with my immediate family.
My ideal thought, my thought is that a good death would be me. If I'm gonna die, I just want to have time to say goodbye to the people that I love,
Okay.
to spend time with them as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And my funeral, what I would like my funeral to look like will be that everybody's there. I get people go see me and then just be cremated.
Okay. Did you want to have like a viewing for your funeral, or
I would like to have a viewing just so I could see if I'm in heaven with God, because I believe I'm gonna go to heaven. Hopefully, this,
an afterlife?
God, an afterlife that God will take me, and I'm looking down and I'm saying, "Oh, you didn't go to my funeral." But I want people to be in my funeral, and then.
So you want that viewing process, and then afterwards be cremated.
Yes.
And then what happens after that? Have you thought further than that, or that's it?
No, that I'm able to see, like I said, if I'm able, my spirit goes up to God, that I'm able to be around to see, see my kids, see my grandkids,
And just be around.
Be around them.
Okay.
Yeah, be around them.
And with your while you're dying, or your dying process, your end of life process, would you want people? You said you wanted to be around people and to spend as much time. Let's say you are terminally ill, you have 1 week left to live. Do you want everybody to be there always with you, or do you want to kind of be by yourself?
No, I will want people around. I will want family around. Yeah, the more time I spend with the family, the
Yeah.
better I think it'll be for me, because I don't want to just go in lock myself up, because it's more depressing. At least have people to come, make you laugh a little bit still, even though you're going through whatever you're going through. But I believe that you need people around you.
Mhm. So
The real love, people
would
that
you
love
want like a party, or would you want still like people around you, but it could be like, a somber affair, or it could be
I know. I mean, I would
music.
want people to celebrate my life, not to
Mhm.
celebrate my death. But I know that's not gonna happen, because with us,
Well, it could.
Hispanic, well, you know how it is. Well, you have certain people in your life that they just that they'll see it the wrong way. If people are celebrating your death instead of celebrating your life. But yeah, I would like people to. I would love to have music. The funeral home to have the salsa that I like. The kind of music that I like. And I just want people to be happy, and hopefully that I put things in them that they'll be able to say nice things about me. Not all mean stuff.
Like on the eulogy.
Yeah,
She up
and when
top.
people want to say things,
Yeah.
and people willing just to say, "Oh, I don't know what to say about him." No, I would like people to know what to say about me, how I live life. You know?
Mm. I So part of me is like an ideal death is nothing insane happens to me. I don't get murdered. I don't get ran over by a car. And I'm just comfortable with the setting that I'm in. Like, I'm in my rocking chair in my future years, just comfortable with what I've done. Who knows what's happening in my life? I'm just drinking tea, whatever it is. That would be like obviously my ideal form of a good death. Like I'm content with where I'm at. And if I were to just pass in that moment, so be it.
Okay, gotcha.
But another part of me, and I think this is going to be just a main topic that is going to, I guess, hover over this conversation,
Okay.
is that like in reality, I can't ever really imagine what a good death would be, or even like how a good funeral would be for me, because I mean, death is going to happen at any point.
Mhm.
And let's say in the case that it's not ideal and I die in a like part of my life where I'm not really content with what I'm doing and stuff like that, there's only so many things I can do in that moment to be like, oh, let me change my life around and have a good death. Like,
Yeah.
what? I get stabbed. I only have a few seconds until someone brings me to the hospital or something. So, because I know that death is going to happen to anyone at any point, I don't ever really want to idealize anything in my brain, give myself some sort of false, misconception or thought about, what a good death would be. Because I know if it didn't happen in an ideal way, then I'm gonna be bummed out. It's like, oh dang,
That's
I died.
true, yeah,
What the hell
I can
is
see it.
I never thought about like knowing I would die and what I would do in that situation. I feel like I would want to be around like really, really close people to me and not really around a lot of people, and maybe do some fun activities or things that I've always wanted to do. But yeah, I can't see myself with like a lot of people around me all the time.
So kind of more just like an intimate kind of setting.
Yeah, because saying I want to be alone just doesn't sound
Some people
like the
do.
ideal route.
Yeah,
I
some
know, I
people do like
understand
to
that,
be alone.
because my introverted self goes immediately to like, I'm gonna be sad, I'm gonna have down days where I'm gonna want to be alone. Maybe, yeah, but I feel like it'll be better for me. I think I would plan to be around close family.
Okay. Have you ever thought about what your funeral would look like?
Well, my culture is different than it identifies closely or intertwines a lot with my religion, which is Muslim, or Islam. So the way that we have a funeral is pretty much like, I don't think, I think I went to one American funeral, and they do more socializing than I think we do. It would be It's like you go to the cemetery. The only big difference is that we tend to not do anything but be buried.
Okay.
So it would be a burial. The Muslim funerals, you have to do the funeral as soon as possible. You have to try not to desecrate the body in any way, meaning you don't really embalm anybody, or you wouldn't get an autopsy unless you like really had to. Like, they try to keep the body intact. The body's washed, and every Muslim person is supposed to just be covered in a white sheet.
Okay.
before they're buried. So it's not like I would have to choose an outfit or anything like that.
Well, that's good.
Your-
It's a lot easier for you.
Your body's washed, you're put in a sheet, and then you're buried, and there's like a prayer service.
I had to write an obituary about myself, which got me thinking a little bit about it. I think I would like to be surrounded by family because the idea of being surrounded by people who have loved you, even at your end, has always seemed really nice. Like a nice send off.
So it's really interesting because most of you guys have talked about your good death being surrounded by family, and just living out your days in a nice, peaceful kind of setting, which is really interesting because in the past, there have been cases of people who die to be a martyr, and martyrdom was kind of like a big idea, or like a good death in some people's eyes. And there's a article by Christoph de Spiegler where he talks about how being a martyr was actually their way of changing society. So they viewed death as a way to get their very last words out in protest in Belgium and the Netherlands back in the day. So this is like back in 1880 to 1840, but they really did use their life and their death as their final words and their final way of communicating what they really wanted. All right, so moving on, how would you guys describe your culture's view on the end of life process or death?
So first off, when anyone dies, there's like the initial questions, like, obviously like who, what, when, how, all that kind of stuff. But I think a big basis of it is almost analogous to karma. Like when people die, it's like, oh, if they knew they were a bad person, they've done all these horrible things, and people around them kind of know their whole background. It's like clearly the superstition is like clearly they rushed themselves to death. Like there was something that, something that knew purposefully what they were doing, and they were like, oh yeah, you gotta go. Like Haitian people just believe there is something that is like obviously following them around and is waiting for that right moment. On the flip side of that, when it happens to good people, it's also like something was out to get them, because people get so shocked. They're like, oh, this is the sweetest person I've ever known. There was obviously some sort of spirit, like something after them, that caused that too early. So already off the first basis, it's like, okay, what has that person done, and what do people around them sort of think? But at least when it comes to the death process, there's also that element of bluntness to it. It's like people grieve, they have their condolences. It really depends on sort of the subcultures of people in Haiti, because I know my family, like, we're Catholic, but I wouldn't say we do a whole lot of voodoo, but
It's in there. Yeah, there's always that undertone.
It's there, yeah. And I don't know, sometimes when I say voodoo and people hear about that, they get a completely different, like, they're like, oh my gosh, you do voodoo? Like the people in, the
No,
princess
you're
and the
good.
frog,
Yeah.
like cooking stuff up. I'm like, no, are not doing that. But that slight element of like religion and like voodoo practices, there's, people grieve, people do their thing. My parents, for example, they'll light candles, put bread and fruit out for that certain person that died, especially if it's like a close individual. And a lot of people say that, when someone dies, they get like a X amount of days where they're a zombie. And that's another thing that has a completely different connotation in America, because zombies are like obviously the brain-eating weirdos.
Walking Dead, yeah.
But for us, it's mainly just someone whose soul is kind of still there after their death. And it's, you get that transition time before you move on. So like my parents will do the whole put out the bread, fruit, stuff like that. So they're just traveling safely. They know they have people behind their back leading them on to wherever they're going.
Gotcha. Okay.
So yeah, that's kind of how like some of the cultural practices that kind of go on with death and for like Haitian people.
Mhm.
But really, like I was saying, how that whole blunt aspect to it, it's like, okay, after the grieving, and if anyone wants to have like, their ritual practices or whatever, it's it's time to let them go. It
Yeah.
it happened, you know. And I was kind of thinking of like a good word to say, because it's not like we celebrate per se. Like I know other cultures, they have like giant celebrations about it. While other cultures it's like very just somber, like they died, this is a terrible thing, nothing's going on. But for us, I think it's just we're comfortable with like death. Like it happens, we grieved, and after it happens, it's like, okay, like they're gone now. There's no miracle in the world that we could do to bring people back,
Mhm.
no matter what it is. There may be practices to like sort of call on spirits, but everybody knows there's no way to just bring someone back from the dead. Like it just can't
Physically.
happen.
Yeah, you won't be able to hold them or touch them again.
Exactly. And that was kind of that was like almost a language barrier I was kind of going throughout life, like with English and just like Creole, because
Mhm.
people would always say like my late father, or like this person is no longer with us. And especially the late thing, I was like,
Uh-huh.
are they early, or what's going on? But I didn't know that like people in America, like that was like death is kind of taboo for them. So they try to kind of, beat
Go
around the
around it,
bush
yeah.
for what it is. But if you were to ask my parents like what happened to someone that died recently, it's like, oh yeah, they died from XYZ. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's
There's
kind of how the dying process is for us.
there's been times, I mean, again, I'm more identify with American because I've never been to the island, but I
Mhm.
did grow up with that side. But even now I'm still like, oh, like, did that person die? Or like whatever, like I'll use death or die, and then other people are like, oh no, you can't use that. Like you have to say
Right.
that that's not nice or that's not like appropriate. I'm like, what
Mhm.
do you mean? Like it is what it is. Like
Like that's how they went.
good.
They
Yeah.
yeah,
So yeah,
it's
I
so
get
weird. Yeah.
that. That was kind of interesting about the like zombie in the afterlife, because even in America, when you die, there's always that saying like you just die alone. But
Mhm.
with yours, it's more of like yeah, you died alone, but you still have everybody there with you until you're completely gone. Like
Yeah,
walk
exactly.
you
Like
and guide you through it.
exactly. I think that's also why like we were talking about it earlier, how when you die, like do you want people to just leave you alone or do whatever? And it's
Yeah.
like, I mean, yeah, like I think at that point I would want people to leave me alone, but it's not because I don't think anyone's there for me, because, you know, my parents do that, my parents do
Mhm.
that sort of ritual for people that are gone, because it's like they died alone, but they definitely be there a part of the process, but
Mhm.
it's really them, you know.
Yeah.
We can light the candles, we can put out the bread and the fruits to sort of symbolize like, oh, we're trying to just help you lead you a good life to the spirit world. But at the end of the day, it's like it's the individual, like it's up to them, and it's their path, it's their life, and it's their life and their afterlife. So there's not a whole lot that we can
Yeah.
do. You just have to be comfortable with the process. So
Yeah.
I think everybody really has their own thought on that process. You know, like for me, my mother grew up where when her grandmother passed away, the funeral was held in that person's home, and they take pictures and everything like that of the person in the casket. So growing up for me, even though we didn't have funerals in the home, they did take pictures of my family members that had passed. For me, like the end of life process, I feel like if a person is terminal, I feel like the humane way of doing that is like being able to euthanize, for a better word, move to Oregon And I guess,
do like a medically
Yeah,
induced death.
yes.
Okay.
I think that's humane, and I think it should be given, not that you would have to move to Oregon, but I think every state should offer that if people want that, if they know that they're terminal and there's no hope. And it would make it easier on the family members watching that person suffer.
To me, it does make sense to have that kind of, not a way out, because it's, if you're terminal, you already know it's coming, so it's not a way out, but it's definitely a control that you can have at the end.
Exactly, and having watched somebody that I love suffer for 10 months before she passed away, it's harder on the family with that. So I just feel like I don't want to be that burden. I don't want to cause that suffering of people that are watching me pass away. So that's why I think dying in somebody's sleep just
Is the easiest way
is
to go.
easier, and it's just the best way.
Yeah.
Now, maybe a little bit more now, but us growing up, we never saw nothing like that. There was no music allowed to play. You weren't allowed to listen to music for like 9 days to
Oh, wow.
pray. People just pray. But I think now things change. So yeah.
Oh, so with Puerto Ricans or New York Ricans or any of that, like in that cultural, it's more about they lean into religion.
The religion.
And
pray,
they pray.
They pray for like, I think it's like when you die, I think it's like 9 days. And then they have a 40-day, they pick a day, 40 days for 40 days, I think it is. And everybody gets together and they have the rosary, they pray the rosary.
Okay.
It's more like a more religious type, praise time than celebrating.
Gotcha. Okay.
They'll pray for you or whatever, but I want to be celebrated. I know people are gonna be sad. I don't want to say people are gonna be sad. It's gonna be sad, but I would like people to be happy too.
Like share
I
good
lived.
times. Yeah.
Hopefully I live to be like 103 or something like that, and then that'll be yeah.
Yeah, it is kind of similar. They do have like a sheikh or an imam, like a head of a mosque type of person or a religious leader of a mosque to come and do like a more formal prayer with the family.
Okay.
If it's at home or in the hospital, that's available. Just like I think it is for any religion in a hospital setting. They have religious leaders that can come pray for people who are really having health issues. I believe the same goes for us as well. Yeah. What was the other question you asked? I'm sorry.
Just about how they view the end of life, like leading up to their end of life.
So obviously, like with Islam, I mean, it's so weird because everything I'm saying is from what I understand as a Muslim instead of a cultural thing. But where I'm from is a predominantly Muslim country or Muslim place. There are a lot of Christians there actually as well. But yeah, a lot of my cultural things tend to go more towards the religious aspect just because they're pretty, they go a lot more closely to that book. And they try to stick by that book. So leading up to a funeral, the funeral it has to be done as soon as possible. Typically, I've seen a lot of Muslim cemeteries. I don't really know if there's a big difference between Muslim cemeteries and other ones. I think that they just tend to go towards that direction. They do the funeral as soon as possible. Usually it's the next day if they can. Sometimes they wait for family, but like I said before, they don't like to keep the body out too long. They want it to be buried as soon as possible. Mostly just a lot of prayers, and I feel like that is just something that most people would identify with and be similar to, is that you just want close friends, family around, praying for you, praying that you pass in a way that's non-sufferable or more at ease if it was to happen. The planning part, I believe that there's a formal funeral with like the burial and the prayer there, and then afterwards people tend to go to their relative's house and offer support to the family. That's not always a thing. But honestly, I haven't been to many funerals, fortunately. I haven't lost.
This all kind of ties back to Tony Walter's article, where he goes a little bit more in depth about how historically death is usually tied towards religion, and how people leaned into religion more back in the day. And I feel like a lot more ethnic groups or POC cultures will kind of still be in that religious aspect, whereas the traditional white American culture is a little bit more geared towards medical, um, like medical first. So going to the hospital or going to hospice, and just making sure that the hospital is able to control that versus leaving it in the hands of your God.
Okay, me personally with that was my father. Like I was my father when I was like 6 years old. My
Okay.
father passed away, and I was never able to go see him in his viewing. We were never able to say so. I don't feel like I ever say goodbye to my dad.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So has that influenced your views on death now? Would you, since you weren't able to say goodbye at the very end, is it something that you really want now, that you want to make sure you can say goodbye to everyone at the end?
Yes. I want to
Okay.
be able to know if I know. I mean, I don't want to know when I'm dying because then I'm going to look forward to that. But if I knew something came up and I found out or whatever, yeah, especially my boys, my kids, my
Mhm.
family, you know.
So I think this also skews my viewpoint because I don't like, I've never really been that close to death myself. Like, obviously, when family members die, a lot of family members we've ever like spoken about, like I haven't seen them in years, or
Okay.
I'm not necessarily close with them. So when they die, I'm like, I give my condolences, but it doesn't move me in any sort of
Mhm.
way. Um, my only closest experience with death was just a classmate of mine back in high school had committed suicide, and I it was kind of weird to like sort of think about only because I have seen her before. So just knowing
Okay.
that like they were gone. But I think in that same point too, with like how comfortable, I don't want to generalize Haitians, but like at least my family is with the concept of death. It's like I knew like, okay, after today, I'm not gonna see her again. Like she's gone. So those are only like my few instances really with death.
Okay. Was there a big difference between like you versus your classmates when that
For
incident happened?
sure.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people too, like I was saying, like completely tried to avoid the subject. Like she died and it was like we don't talk about this ever. And I'm like, well, I don't think, obviously I'm not going around asking people like, oh, you
Yeah.
remember when our client died? But I don't think it'd be necessarily the greatest to also keep that under wraps because, if she had people that she had a great time with and she had a lot of memories with. So I don't think we should just erase that because they died, Like we
Yeah.
can still talk about all the great things that did happen with her. I'm not gonna obviously reveal her name or anything. We're gonna call her Barbara, I guess. But I'm not gonna just ignore all the things and experiences that I've had with Barbara just because she died. I just don't think that's fair at all, really,
Yeah.
to erase someone.
Especially not for like the people that she like was friends with. Like they have a memory about
Exactly.
her. So
Exactly. That's so weird. And I think it almost forces people to only think about the bad, which is like the death in that moment.
mhm.
And I still don't understand why we would want to ever just drown ourselves in that. Like, they died, yes, but that is one moment out of their entire lifetime. Why are we trying to make that the only focusing lasting moment? It was traumatic, yes, but obviously there has to be some way we can overcome that with remembering
Yeah.
other things about that person.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you do it every day, or not you, but in general, we do it every day when somebody
Mhm.
dies. Like we like to remember those good times about people. So why would it be any different, no matter how
Exactly.
they went? So,
Exactly, yeah.
The closest family member or closest person that I've lost was my grandfather, and that was hard for me because I was really close to him. Um, and I was, I think, early 20s. It was about 10 years ago that he passed. So yeah, I was in my early 20s. So at least I was an adult.
Mhm.
So the first like close hit to home was me processing as an adult. I can't imagine doing that as a younger person or a child. Um, and I took that pretty hard. Um, I remember listening to a lot of music and just trying to tune it out because it was a lot of people that kept coming up and offering their condolences, which was really really nice. But I was there. He lived in Buffalo, so I was there for like a week or two, just because my family all just stayed there.
Okay.
And it was just day after day after day of people coming up to you, and you're like already sad, and you're like trying to not focus. So I know why I'm there. I know what's going on.
Mhm.
It was just constant people like asking you questions, seeing how you're feeling, and you're okay
And
with it the first couple days, and then you're just like, okay, please just
leave
give
me
me some
alone kind of a
space.
thing. Yeah. Were these
Yeah.
people, were they like close family or were they just people that knew your grandfather?
They were a lot of them in the beginning were close family, and then he lived in Buffalo since he was young, and he passed away when he was, I think, in his 60s or 70s. So I mean, he had a whole lifetime there. So he did
Mhm.
have a lot of family. We had a lot of family friends. My mom's side of the family, all her brothers are there. Their friends, everyone knew, you know, the parents of their friends. Most of the time, your friends' parents if you're close enough to them. So all these people
Yeah.
came,
Just
even
showed
from out
up.
of state, people came. So it was really nice to see that much love towards someone and how that comes through even after they pass away. To see them still support you and your family for such a long period after, bringing food and flowers and gifts, and
Mhm.
really being there for my grandma, because obviously, I mean, she was probably the most affected by that. But that was a really nice part of it looking back, though.
That whole sense of community.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I've been to a couple of funerals in my life. Most of them were family members. So like grandparents, my grandpa, my nana. And I wasn't really involved when it came towards the end of their life, but they were people that I had regularly seen growing up and hung out with. So when they passed away, those ones were really hard. And then I also had a funeral that I went to of a friend when I was younger, about 11, who died suddenly, which that one was a very shocking funeral. Um, but I've also been to funerals just in support of other people.
Okay.
I went to one, there was a classmate at my high school who had passed away, who was on the cheer team previously, like towards the beginning of the year, but didn't go on to the next year, but she passed away suddenly. And a lot of the girls on the team knew her. And so we went and supported them. Just like a group thing. Yeah. So I've been to a bunch of different. I actually think going to so many funerals made me less scared to die.
Okay.
It wasn't because death wasn't something I ever thought about. And it wasn't like I was really dreading it, but sometimes I would always wonder like what would happen. But I think seeing at the funerals a bunch of people were always there, and it was just, I mean, it was sad, but like just seeing everybody there for one
One
person
person.
and seeing how that one person affected so many people, it kind of made it more like a relief because it's kind of made it less unknown what might happen. So I think it, like, going to those funerals overall just made me feel better about the process of dying.
Okay.
A lot. From pets to other family members. I would say I've probably actually helped at least 3 people pass. They were suffering, and one was my grandfather. He fell with his walker and a bed fell on his neck and broke his neck. And he survived that, and he was in the hospital, and they were concerned about pneumonia setting in because he was an older man in his 80s. And they said that he couldn't move for 6 to 8 months. He would have to lay flat, and they were concerned about pneumonia setting in. Well, when I went and saw him, I could already heard that process happening, and it hadn't even been 24 hours. So the following day, they called and said that he was definitely going to pass away. And I went up there, and because my grandmother had passed away by herself, I swore I was never going to let a family member die again by themselves. I was going to be there with them, because it's got to be scary, even though they're not talking to you. They always say they can hear what's going on, and I didn't want them to be alone when they were passing away. So when everybody had left to go home the night my grandfather passed away, it was just him and I was singing to him his favorite song, and then, told him it was okay to pass, that we'd make sure Aunt Eleanor was taken care of. That was his second wife. And a tear came out his eye, and he passed away. So I think talking to a person as they're dying and let them know that their loved ones were going to be taken care of makes it easier for that person to let go.
Yeah, they're not so scared since they're not there alone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that was that first one. Then the second one was his second wife that I was with, and she passed away a little bit after Mother's Day. She choked on a piece of steak on Mother's Day when my uncles took her out, and they had to put her on a ventilator, and 3 days later we ended up removing the ventilator. I was her healthcare surrogate, but she was kind of hanging on while everybody was in the room with her, and everybody left to go get some lunch. And then I sat with her, and I told her, and I was holding her hand and told her that everybody was gone, that it was just me. You wanted me to be here with you. I'm here. It's okay to let go and go be with Grandpa and all your other loved ones who passed. And she passed pretty quickly after everybody left the room.
So you pretty much stayed for that 11th hour vigil,
Mhm.
like just there until the very end.
Yep. And then it was my husband's grandfather, who was congestive heart failure, couldn't get out of bed. And that was a long process, about 2 weeks, where the grandsons were over every night, helping get him in and out of out of bed to go to the bathroom. And I was sitting with him, talking to him one day, and he was telling me how tired he was, and he was ready to let go, but he couldn't because of his wife and his one son that has some learning disability issues. And I tried telling him that they would be okay. There were people there that loved them and would make sure that they were taken care of, and if he needed to go, it would be okay. And he's like, I'm just really worried about him. So at that point, I went over to Chris's grandmother, his wife, my husband's grandmother, and told her that he was ready to go, and she thought meant to go to the bathroom. And I said, no, he's ready to go, but you and Sean need to tell him that it's okay for him to go and that you guys will be taken care of. So she just looked at me, and I said, you need to tell him that because he's ready to go. And she went over there, and Sean went over there, and they were talking to him and told him that they would be okay, that there was plenty of people around that loved them and would make sure that they were okay. And I would say probably a good 10-15 minutes later, he passed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I just feel like when somebody's in that stage, they just need to hear that it's okay for them to go, and that they'll be the people that are alive will be okay and will take care of those person's loved ones.
I think from what I've heard from people is that when you're getting closer to death, it's kind of a fear of leaving people behind.
Mhm.
So it's the fear of what are they going to do without you,
Mhm.
instead of just the focus being on you yourself going through that process and making sure the people around you are giving you that support through it all. So you gave them that support.
Yeah, and I fully believe that 100%. And you know, there's different stories. I know when my dad's father passed away, he had dementia. And you know, that death, I wasn't there, that was up north. And it was traumatizing to my dad because it was like he was fighting somebody off. And my dad had to leave the room for that. And now when my mom was sick towards the end, she did have like visions of her dad who had already passed. That was the one that broke his neck. And she would call out to him.
Oh, wow.
So it was almost like they were there, you know, trying to help guide her, but it was more of a peaceful, loving situation than what my dad's, you know, father passed away from. So when she would wake up after it would kind of be in her sleep when she would do that. And then she would wake up and she would say, well, I was talking to my dad and we were at the lake. They used to vacation at a lake every summer. So,
Oh, wow.
so that was like, we just felt like that's kind of where they're all at this lake where they used to vacation at.
Hanging
So,
out, kayaking
Yeah.
around.
yeah.
So, with all of those experiences you have with death, how has that influenced how you view death, or has it changed the way that you would want your funeral to go, or the way that you've looked at how you want your end of life process to go?
I definitely don't, I don't want to be kept alive with machines. I would love for the process to medically induce death
Mhm.
be legal by that time. I would love for that. If not, I'm moving. Um, and I feel like funerals it's good for some people, but in my view, it's very hard for the people that have lost that person to go and be the host. Like you're basically hosting and
Mhm.
you know, having to make sure everybody's comfortable, and it's like you don't really get to say your goodbyes like the way you would want to say goodbye to your loved one.
Mhm.
So I don't want any of that. I just want to be cremated. I want, like I said, my immediate family, which would be my kids and my husband if he's still alive, grandkids if I ever have them, you know, to kind of get together and just talk about memories of that. And, you know, to me, for me personally, I think that's a lot of wasted money to go with the
A big
extravagant farewell.
Mhm. So your family members that you experienced that death with, they were in hospice.
No,
Or,
my mom was in hospice.
okay.
My grandfather and his second wife were at the hospital. So I've learned that if you want to die at home, which is what I want to be at home,
Mhm.
that if you have hospice involved, then when you do pass away, that you wouldn't have to have an autopsy. And I know my grandmother, my mom's mother, when she passed away in the hospital, she was by herself. She didn't have anybody there, family members. And that always was hard on me because she had a long illness and we were all by her side through the illness, but then she ended up passing away by herself. And that traumatized my mom a little bit. And at that point, it was when I was like, I'm never going to let anybody die by themselves.
Yeah.
I'm going to be there and help them through it.
So I actually found a study that actually talks about the medically induced death. This one specifically is for California and the End of Life Option Act. This is back in 2019, where they gathered data from different populations in California. So they focused on Black people, Latinos, and different white populations in California, and just asked them questions about whether or not they would be in favor of a medically induced death or if they were against it. And surprisingly, a lot of the, well, I guess not really surprisingly for me, but a lot of the POC individuals were against going for the End of Life Act or End of Life Option Act, and whereas the white populations were actually more for it. I feel like this should just be kind of okay anywhere you go. Again, if you're in your right mind, if that option is there for some people, I'm sure it would help them have that peace of mind at the very end. Of course, it's not for everybody, but for those who do want it, I do think it's a really good option. And this kind of leads us into our final question, where I am just going to ask you guys what your opinions are surrounding death and the dying process in America. I do feel that America has this kind of sense of dragging out the inevitable, where a lot of people will elect to go into the hospital or stay on life support and keep them on for as long as they can and drag it out, where some people would just say that it is what it is and there's not really a sense in dragging that out. But I just want to hear what all your opinions are about that.
I don't like the burial part of it, freaks me out a little bit. Because one of my uncles was a mortician, worked with a mortician. So he kind of gave us a little bit of rundown of like what happens to prepare a body for burial.
Okay.
So that part freaks me out a little bit. So that's why I chose cremation for myself.
A nice, easy, just
Yeah.
put you in and you're done.
Whereas my mom, for the longest time, cremation freaked her out about being set on fire. Because what if she was not really dead, you know, that type of thing. But then she changed her mind because then she thought about, you know, her parents being buried and her not being able to go and visit. So over time they get, you know, as generations die off, then these people are not getting visited anymore. So that was what changed her mind a bit with wanting to be cremated, because she'll be passed down forever.
Yeah.
Everybody loves her.
Everybody
so,
will be there with her. Yeah.
yeah, so she'll never be away on a holiday or anything like that. You know, and then my husband wants to be cremated and like spread around a big oak tree. Christopher won't let me do anything but come live with him. So I'm like, do with my ashes what you please. Because I'm not gonna be here anymore.
As long as the container is pretty.
Yeah,
That's all that matters.
Yep, that's what it wants. Gotta be a rose, gotta be pink. And then you know, there's other things that are cool out there. I think my husband would probably also like the whole tree thing.
A tree burial.
Yeah. But I think he was thinking more of it would be like an ashes thing, other than, you know, his body being there. I think that might freak him out a little bit. So, you know, but everybody has their own opinion what works best for you. You just gotta maybe educate yourself on the different things.
There's a ton. Yeah, you can be turned into a diamond.
Yeah.
Turned into a tattoo.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different things you can do.
Yeah. So I just feel like, you know, whatever, you just gotta research on what's gonna work best for you.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, you already summed it up perfectly. It is what it is. And I also just don't understand that aspect of really dragging it out. And I think also, besides like a culture aspect, it's also like oddly an academic aspect that kind of influences me, because I'm a health sciences major. So
Okay.
like I'm surrounded by death in a way that's in the textbooks, and like, you know, people dying because of certain, like, you know, conditions, etc., diseases. So especially in those cases where someone is dying of like some sort of terminal illness, or people who are clearly suffering in their current lifetime, and I mean, it's great that their family members, friends, etc., want to keep them around, want to, you know, try to give them the best care possible before they go. But I just really don't see the point of that if, for lack of better words, their time is it's here. Like, they're ready to go. I don't see a point in ever dragging that out. But obviously it's up to the individuals and their family. My opinion has no worth to them if I don't know whoever is listening to this podcast or stuff like that. But I think death is really just, it is what it is. Like, it's gonna happen to everyone at some point. And if we had the keys for immortality, like, we wouldn't obviously be sitting here and having this conversation. But I don't want to have these sort of rose-colored glasses put on, imagining that there's so much that more that we could do before their death. Like, we have to make sure we try to shove in and cram in all these good moments and etc. Because that's just not how life works, you know. There's only so much time we have allotted on the planet, and to try to cram in everything you could ever imagine in those last few moments, it's overwhelming. The person's not even going to have like the greatest time enjoying it unless they're in a condition to do so. Like, it's just, it doesn't seem beneficial at all to me. So really, with the dying process, I'm like, you just gotta let it happen. Like, it sucks, but you have to let it happen. And it makes the grieving process, I feel like, a little bit easier if you are comfortable with that idea, you know?
Yeah, I know I've talked to a lot of my family members, and even like with my mom specifically, she will always say like, oh, we don't talk about it. Like, she's okay with, like, you know, like, it's gonna happen to everybody, but for her, it's like, let's not dwell on that. And I'm like, but we have to dwell, like, at least we have to
Right.
figure out what you want at the end, so that I'm not the one, or whoever else is continuously like you know, prolonging it, instead of just like, if you want to go, then you want to go.
Exactly. It's, I don't know, maybe just I have like a bad take on it, but it is truly something to me where it's like, if we don't ever talk about it, like, people are just gonna grieve and like be spiraling forever. I don't understand like how we can't be comfortable with it, because it's kind of like any other thing in life, you know. If you don't get accustomed to, or just even exposed to something, and then when you finally are, you don't know how to handle it, well, it's because you were never given that pre-exposure. Like, it's like, death is like, I'm not saying anybody should just be walking up to dead bodies. No way. This is very strange. But if you don't ever talk about it, like, let's say with your kids, for example, and then someone close to them does die, they're not going to know how to handle it like properly, or not even properly, just in a way that's like healthy for them, you know? And I don't know. I think just beating around the bush every day, trying to be like, oh, you know, don't talk about that, or, you know, they passed, they're no longer with us. I'm like, no, they died, you know, they died. This is what happened. And we can, you know, we can take our time to focus on that, but we're going to also take our time to be like, but this person also had a great life. And these were the things that they did, you know, this is the type of fun that we had with them, you know?
Okay, my opinion, and you know, what I've been through and you know, with the family. I remember years ago, my aunt, she was really sick, and they had found cancer in her stomach. They didn't think she was gonna make it more than a week. And I remember she was in the hospital, and she wanted to be brought home. She wanted to be comfortable. She was saying she wanted to be home in her bed. And as long as they have a comfortable place that you can bring them to in your house, and with people around you, your family, that able to go say goodbye, they brought her home. Maybe it was like on Thursday. On that Sunday, she died. She already knew, and she wanted to come home to spend the time with her family.
The last time.
And her sisters, all her sisters were there. Her kids were there, and I remember it was something like they were waiting for her, and she died sleeping.
Okay,
No,
so it was
yeah.
it was a Still sad,
Yeah.
of course, it's still gonna be sad because somebody's passing on, somebody's
Mhm.
dying,
But everybody was
but
there.
everyone was there.
Everybody was comfortable, and the sisters were still cooking, even though she was, they were to spend, they got to spend time with her before she died.
Yeah,
And I know that was like a relief for her, the sisters, even though it was hard, and the kids, but at least they knew that she was there. That they got
Yeah.
to spend the last moments with her.
I would say it's even a relief for her
Mhm.
because then she doesn't have to be surrounded by strangers at the
Yeah.
end. Like she's there
Mhm.
with her family.
Yeah, because they,
She's comfortable.
right, because
So.
the doctors told her that she wasn't gonna live long. It was,
Mhm.
they already knew that. And exactly how they said it that weekend, I remember it was on a Sunday, she got to go home like on a Wednesday, and then that Sunday, that's when she passed away. And that's the way I would like for my kids. I would like to have people around me if I'm dying. I know it hurts the person, but at least that's something. I don't know. I don't want to do it to hurt them, but at least I think it's a relief that if they were there instead of me being in a hospital or in a nursing home and I pass away, and then you find out like 6
few
hours
hours later,
later,
yeah.
and you would want to be like, if she went through something, I should have been there with her. I should have been holding her hand,
Mhm. Yeah, you don't have that regret or
Yeah,
anything
yeah.
since
That
you're
you had
dying
it
with
with-
them.
yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like in America, like the funeral usually is only like that day. It's pretty short. And I feel like it's like a lot of the times it's quickly after a person will pass away. And I feel like it's more of like like you're in mourning, like it's more like a sad thing. Like you talk about the person's life, but it's not. I feel like because I feel like it's not like a celebration. It's kind of a celebration of their life, but more in a way where it's just like you look back on what these people have done, and you have like a couple of people talk about whoever passed away and like share a couple of stories. But I feel like more like subdued.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what are your opinions on that? Like, do you see it as something that makes sense to you? Is it something that you wish could be different?
I think it makes sense, but at the same time, I also like the idea of like people I've seen on social media a lot where people will talk about like what they want to happen after they die, whether they want people to, be in mourning, be sad, or if they want people to like look at the death and instead of being sad, like just celebrate what that person had done and, celebrate their life and, kind of make a party out of it, like a celebration of their life. So I don't think I don't think there's one wrong way to, handle like life after death. But yeah, I don't know.
Okay. Yeah. A lot of people, I mean, death is a personal thing. So depending on what your views are, what your cultures are, some people lean more into religion, some people lean more into social aspects, which some people will actually not want any of it.
Yeah.
So it just really depends.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So I think just like a person should, I know people who really are against funerals. My mom doesn't want a funeral, but I know some people that are adamant about having one. So again, it's like you said, it's a personal choice. So whatever a person decides, I think it's good to talk about those kinds of things.
I feel like, I've only been to one American funeral, and it was weird for me to see like, the wake thing. I don't feel like people should have to view someone who passed away, but I understand why some people do need to see that. That for me is weird. We don't typically do that.
Okay.
So the viewing part is not something that I am familiar with knowing. I'm like I said, I'm not a scholar Muslim over here. I'm not the best. I'm also more open-minded. So for me, like, I know we don't believe in doing cremation. I understand why some people like it, and I think it's kind of good that some people go that route. Helps the environment a little bit. I mean, eventually And then there's those other kind of more environmentally friendly methods that, like, my brother was recently talking about, like coral and trees and
Mhm.
all of these other things. So I feel like I'm more open-minded about that stuff because I think that that has like a beautiful part to it. Like you could actually honor somebody with a living physical thing and there being a tree or something that they can help others
Yeah, in their
see
name.
life and life. Yeah, which is really nice. I like that part about it.
Yeah.
But American funerals, I don't have as much knowledge about. But the other thing was the big social thing, like like everyone's like eating at a like it was at a dining hall talking, and I don't know. I feel like it almost comes into like a party.
Yeah.
I get the celebrating of life. I understand that, but it just felt weird to go cry, for this person 1 minute, and then the next minute you're eating and laughing. And some of the conversation was towards that person, but then some of it wasn't. So I felt like that, I don't know. I remember thinking that was a little different for me.
Like it was like a quick turnaround. Like
Yeah,
people,
it
they went
was,
to the funeral, they did that thing, and then they moved on and just,
yeah, because
yeah,
I mean,
pretty quickly.
ours aren't really loud or vibrant or full of life. They're just it's a lot of like whispers and prayers, and there's
Mhm.
some chocolates or some fruit. And definitely more solemn melancholy.
Yeah. What are your views on like nursing homes? Would you like, is there a negative
So
stigma around nursing homes for
yes,
you?
only unless it's completely like you have someone in your family that needs like 24/7 surveillance type care. That would be the kind of the only situation. And the 2 people or 3 people that I've known that needed that within my family or community, they had like hospice and home care.
Okay,
And
so they
then
brought it into the home rather than
they
sending
brought it
it the
into the
person
home.
away.
Yeah. So like our culture, I mean, I feel like a lot of besides American culture, I don't know if it's just American culture or what, we don't do nursing homes.
Okay.
Our parents raised us, so we have to take care of our parents. That is a very, very old school mentality, and that's just like ingrained into like I don't know. I feel like it's in multiple ethnic
It is,
backgrounds.
yeah. With me in my family, like I always joke around with my mom that I'll pay for the best like
Nursing
elderly
home?
home where she can go on like little field trips and I'll see her every weekend and she gets so mad at me because like you're saying, like they raised us, so then at the end we still have to care for them.
I
They don't
mean,
want
I
to
feel like
be
you
away
have
from the
to.
family. Yeah.
Or at least split it between your siblings, or you there's always a way, like you can have a mother-in-law suite if you don't want someone exactly in your home. Like it's just there's always I feel like there should always be a way to help take care of your parents. And if you have more than one sibling, I mean that's a lot more helpful. I don't think you can't just desert your parents at at their older years when they need someone and then just leave them by themselves for God
Mhm.
knows how long. This is the saddest thing I
Yeah.
could ever imagine is all those people just don't having not having any family or visitors or anything. It's sad.
Yeah. I mean, I always joke with my mom, but I don't think I would ever do it.
I don't think you would do it.
Yeah.
Cause cause like in my head I'm like, oh my God, could I do that? But I know I couldn't put them in a nursing home. Like
Yeah. I
I
mean, at
know.
that point, what, like you're saying, you only have 5, 10 years left once it gets to that point. Sure,
Yeah.
you might have more, but I like realistically,
Switch them out,
yeah,
travel, like help them travel to your sibling's house
yeah,
and kind of go back and forth. I just there's no reason to let them go into that situation unless there's a medical necessity. I don't agree with doing that.
there was one, I forget where I read this or saw it, but there's some people who will not pay for like to send their parents to like a nursing home or an elderly home, but they'll send
Oh,
it on cruises and they'll just like cruise for the whole year because that's cheaper than actually
Really?
putting them. Yeah.
But they don't
So,
get medical care on a cruise.
well, there's doctors on the cruises, but it's not like
Oh,
it's not a 24/7 nursing home. It's the just like a
that's crazy.
for your parents. Yeah.
Can you imagine though if your parent wasn't able to take care of themselves, taking them on a boat?
I mean, that'll be different. I doubt I doubt that would work. But if, you know, they could take care of themselves, you know, they just needed like they just didn't have
A
somewhere
little
to
help?
live. Yeah, just
Oh,
on a
yeah, if they just
cruise.
don't have somewhere to live, I guess, yeah. I mean, honestly, if you're saying come live with your child or go on a cruise for the rest of your life, I'm sure a lot of them were like, heck yeah, give me a
Yeah,
free
send me on the
cruise.
cruise. So
That's
yeah. I'm
crazy.
sure my mom would do that. She loves
But
cruises.
there's so many nursing homes, especially here, so it's just like how many people are actually in there. It
Yeah.
like baffles my mind. And they all seem very capable, very like on point. A lot of them seem like they're still there mentally able to take care of themselves. They're just kind of pushed over there for
Yeah.
multiple
Kind of
reasons.
forgotten. Yeah. That's the sad part.
It
Yeah.
is so sad.
But I mean, that's usually what you see in the media is sending your parents when they get to that age, like just ship them off kind of a thing.
I know, but then they also in American culture also though they send kids off at 18 and get them out of the house. And
That is
my
true,
family's not like that. My family's not that like that either.
yeah. Yeah, mine isn't either. They would rather us stay home until we like
As long
find
as
someone to
possible.
marry. Yeah.
Exactly, until marriage or at least until you have your own thing going on. But
Mhm.
the nursing home and stuff. I mean, if insurance covers nursing homes, wouldn't they cover hospice care? Like, why would you choose to put them in a nursing home instead of just having them at the house and having someone come check on them? That
Yeah.
way
I
they still have
will
their independence.
hospice would I think is a little different because hospice you have that like that timeline. Like, you know, like you know
So,
that they have that there's a terminal illness or they're gonna be dying soon. They need like not life
or even
support,
like
but
what is it? A CNA, like a home health aide?
mhm.
I
Yeah, and
don't,
they'll come to your
yeah,
home for a few hours or whatever and help you out.
yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
I feel like that would even be a more financially like better situation than going full time in a nursing home, but
Yeah,
I don't know.
who knows? I don't know. It really does depend on your culture and how you grew up and your beliefs. So
There you have it. Is death as scary as you think, or has this podcast opened your mind to the world of possibilities that exist? Are you thinking about your good death? As you navigate what comes next, remember to create safe spaces for people of all ages and backgrounds to talk about differences in culture. Don't be afraid to think about the unknown, and always remember to keep an open mind. Special thank you to our guests for being so vulnerable and showing us how varied beliefs around death could be. This is Marcus from Demystifying Death. Rest in peace.